Elliotte Friedman has dropped an absolute bombshell on the Boston Bruins on the most recent episode of 32 Thoughts, the podcast. He discusses what his thoughts are on a Bruins rebuild, and this is going to have a lot of fans very, very surprised. Be sure to stick around, hear what we have to say about this video, with many quotes coming from Elliotte Friedman, as well as the Bruins players and team here in this video. Before we get into it, though, we know that 70% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. We are on the road to 6K, and if we could hit that very soon, that would be absolutely incredible. We have a lot of busy Bruins news coming up soon, so you won't want to miss it. Be sure to hit that sub button and not miss a beat of the Boston Bruins. But without any further ado, let's get into this very big bombshell that Elliotte Friedman had dropped on the most recent episode of 32 Thoughts, the podcast. I do have both of these here as quotes in this video, and let's get right into it. He says, Boston has some elite players. Look at Pittsburgh. They have an elite of the elite, but it catches up to you eventually. Eventually, you hit that cycle where you have to decide, are you going to rebuild and tear down? And you have, and you and I have talked a lot about the rebuild and the teardown and how hard they are. I think Boston, to me, like rebuilding, is not in their DNA. And this is what he had in the conversation on 32 Thoughts of the podcast with Kyle Bukauskas of Sportsnet. And as you see here, Elliotte Friedman was not scared to share that he does not think a rebuild is in the Bruins' future. And this is something that we've briefly discussed here on the channel, and something that it seems like we're going to have to talk about a lot more as the weeks go by, and especially over the recent few games in the beginning of the new year, 2025. The Bruins have been playing. They've been playing their game, but have not found the success they've been looking for. They've had many players start to heat up from what we've seen at the beginning of the season, but it seems to be not enough at this point in the season. And from what we're seeing as of late, we want to see more, and we need to see more if we do want to see any bit of success from the Bruins at the end of the regular season. And that's what the goal is for the Bruins. That's what they're playing for. They're not playing to get eliminated at the end of the regular season. But Elliotte Friedman had more to say on this topic, and here's the second half of this. He says they've lost 2 Hall of Famers and 1 who was not a Hall of Famer, but a great player, and eventually that catches up to you. So I just look at them and I say, I think Boston has to save some big picture conversations. They lost again on Sunday night. I think that the Bruins have to decide where they are and where they really want to go. And I think this is exactly the point that we need to look at. And Elliotte Friedman, we know that how respected he is in the industry, and I think that bottom part of this quote, they need to really take a look at where they are and where they want to be, is a big thing the Bruins need to take into consideration. I think a big part of this, as well as Elliotte Friedman mentioned, as I've been mentioning, the way that they've played so far as of late in the beginning of the new year, beginning of 2025, has not been bad, but they are not getting the wins they want to. And I want to pull up here the most recent game, of course, at the New York Islanders, that 5-4 loss last night. That was definitely a game that we saw a big bounce back. We saw David Pastrnak really get his feet under him, and this is a game back-to-back 2-goal games for him. Seems like he's actually getting ready to turn it on and kind of getting that groove back, but the rest of the team has not been doing so. And we know David Pastrnak's a very good player. That's no surprise to any Bruins fan, but he cannot guide this team by himself. You know, that's a very tough task to do in the NHL that not even the best players in the world would be able to do. Since hockey is a team game, the NHL is not an easy league to be able to take over a team by yourself, and that's pretty evident so far in this season. But as we look for the next few games, the Bruins are playing 4 games against playoff teams. Edmonton, 2 against Tampa, Florida. We go into another Atlantic Division matchup against the Ottawa Senators twice in 2 weeks. Then we go to a few other matchups, but then we have, once again, the Jets, Colorado, some more tough matchups. And this is a very tough month for the Boston Bruins, and this is going to be a very big month to see where they're going to stand, where they're going to really push for the trade deadline, where they plan on going for this season and potentially for years to come. If they do decide to start it early, this could be a very big decision where we see Trent Frederic, maybe some other names go, maybe we see Morgan Geekie, someone who has been definitely a lot better than what we'd start the season with. But if his value is now back up to where it was, we're trying to rebuild, that he's a name that could go. Pavel Zacha, Charlie Coyle, Brandon Carlo, there are so many options. Now, a lot of those due to mishaps early in the season. Of course, Brandon Carlo not playing with Elias Lindholm is a big loss for him in this season, and that's very evident from the way we've seen him play. But with these upcoming games, this is going to be a very big way to kind of dictate how this season and how the rest of the, coming seasons will go for the Boston Bruins. And I did want to pull up the playoff picture right now, and the Boston Bruins, of course, are in the playoff picture right now, 3rd in the Atlantic. But when we look at Tampa down to the bottom, 1st in the wild card, they have 5 games in hand on us and are only 3 points behind. So we have to assume that that won't last very long. But a big thing to mention here, and I know this is a bit small, I do apologize for that. Couldn't really get all of this in there without making this small. The goal differential. The Boston Bruins and Pittsburgh Penguins are the ones here that they're the only ones in the negative. The rest are quite heavily or very well comfortable in the positive, and we see the Bruins, third in the Atlantic, and you have a negative 20 goal differential. That's not something that you want to see. That's not something that a playoff team has, and I don't want to mention this because of Jeremy Swayman. I don't want to say it's because of Jonas Korpisalo, but the team in front of the players in front of the goaltending, nothing really seemed to align so far, and still, the struggles that this team is having at this very point are still very evident, and something the Bruins are really going to have to lock in on, once again, over these next 5 to 6 games, and especially over this month. And we have to keep in mind what Elliotte Friedman said. I think this is really going to resonate with the Bruins themselves as well. They have to rely and really think about where they're going from here. They cannot just kind of stay in this middle tier. They cannot stay in this middle territory for very long. That's not the way they are, but we've seen the Bruins not have that really rebuild mentality. I will say ever. The Bruins, you don't really see them going full-out rebuild like the Ottawa Senators have, just naming some Atlantic teams, like the Red Wings, you don't see that with the Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins have found their rhythm, they've found their groove for, so many years in the NHL, and that's one thing that the Bruins are really going to have to think about as they kind of look forward, and especially going into next season, when we look at some of these free agents that the Bruins have, you have the entire left wing are free agents. 2 of your bottom right wingers in Brazeau and Koepke, 2 of them who are playing very, very good. John Beecher, Trent Frederic, Morgan Geekie, Brad Marchand. Then you have Mason Lohrei, who was going to be re-signed, and Parker Wotherspoon as well in the NHL that all really need new contracts. Will all of them return? I doubt it, but we have guys like Fabian Lysell, Georgi Merkulov, John Farinacci, so many guys in the AHL that are waiting to make their move, and that would not be considered a rebuild, but that would certainly be the big retool that we thought this season was going to be and last season, and the big retool that the Bruins would likely need to be able to kind of swing this into a rebuild without being a rebuild. And it is a tough situation, but we know that Don Sweeney has not really had the most, unique ideas for this team. He's really just kind of trying to make this team win now every single point that he's ever made a move in the past few seasons, and that's not working for the Boston Bruins. And as we look at the team stats as well, this really shows, once again, how bad the Bruins have been earlier on in this season and how they just can't not let the goals in, how they cannot go out, score 4 or 5, 6 goals and not win the game. That's not feasible. When you score 4 or 5 or 6, you should win the game. And that really comes back to all where David Pastrnak is, with having those 2 back-to-back 2-goal games and, last night and the night before against the Toronto Maple Leafs. We see him firing it up, and we see him really being able to put the puck in the back of the net, something that we haven't had this season, and now we're seeing it. We're not getting the wins we need, but a 2.64 goals per game and a 3.12 goals against, 19th in the league there. The power play is absolutely abysmal, second worst in the NHL, and the penalty kill is not great either at 76.2%, and really, the special teams, we see the defense, nothing seems to be working for this Bruins team. And as I mentioned, David Pastrnak, the 3 losses back-to-back-to-back, 2-1 to the Rangers, 6-4 to the Maple Leafs, and 5-4 in overtime to the Islanders. 4 goals, 2 of those coming from Pastrnak in each of those games. You need to win those games. You score 4, you should absolutely win. And as I mentioned, don't want to blame the goaltending, but it certainly is a big point that we have to talk about at $8.5 million. And not a cheap contract to be able to have goaltending like this at. So, what do you think about this? What do you think about the quote from Elliotte Friedman, the rebuild type of thing that he says the Bruins are not familiar with? Or I don't want to say not familiar with, but not in their system, not what their plans are. Do you think it is time for a rebuild, or do you think it's time to bring up these guys from the AHL? I know a lot of you guys in the comments below want to see Fabian Lysell, want to see these younger guys come up for more than one game, play their game, and just trade some of the guys that are not working. I really don't know why we see some players like Trent Frederic, who's still in the lineup, bound to be traded this season at some point. But why is he still not traded yet? Why is he still in the lineup if he's not performing? He had a goal against the Maple Leafs. That was his first point in 11 games. For a guy like Trent Frederic, who we tried to rely on in a bottom 6 role with this team, not have a point in 11 games, that is simply not feasible for the Boston Bruins at this point in the season, let alone at any point at any season. And especially the one where the Bruins need to win, need to have everybody going the way they started, the way they kind of turned around under Joe Sacco. It is not feasible for that to work. But I do have one more screenshot here. I wanted to pull up the stats for the team. As you see, David Pastrnak now point per game, Then you go for the rest of the lineup. Not very impressive, if I'm going to be honest with you. After Brad Marchand, we see half point per game for Pavel Zacha. He's third on the team. And then you look at the plus minuses as well. Quite a few minuses. I believe the only ones who are not are, as you see there, Pavel Zacha, Charlie McAvoy. The fourth line in Koepke, Beecher, Kaslik is not. And I also believe Zadorov is a +7. So there is only a handful of players who have really been able to keep their positive alive this season, but simply is not feasible. We need the Bruins to do something. I don't know what it is. What do you think it is? But Elliotte Friedman dropped that bombshell that you don't think it's a rebuild, but something has to change. What do you think it is? Let me know in the comments below. Sound off on this update in the Bruins in the comments. But that's all I got in this video. If you did enjoy, give it a like, hit the sub button as well. I'm signing out. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.